You buy a man for 2,000 sesterces, train him for a year, feed him, oil him, and pay doctors to keep him alive. Then, the day he finally steps into the arena, he dies in 4 minutes. And every coin you spent walks out of the arena with someone else's winning bet. That's the part nobody puts in the movies. Today, we're going behind the sand and into the ledger of a Roman Ludus, a gladiator school in the 2nd century AD. We'll follow the money through purchase, training, food, medical care, and the fight itself to see whether the man running the school could actually get rich. The school is called a Ludus. The owner is called a lanista. To the crowd, he looks like a trainer standing at the edge of the arena. To his bankers, he's something closer to a sports franchise owner, a slave trader, and an insurance underwriter, all at the same time. A raw fighter, a slave, a convicted criminal, or a prisoner of war, costs somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 sesterces to buy. A proven veteran, a first-rank fighter with victories on record, can cost 5,000 sesterces or more. That one man alone is worth what an ordinary laborer earns in nearly 8 years. And you haven't even fed him yet. Now he lives in your school for months, maybe years, before he ever fights. You pay for food, doctors, trainers, olive oil for his skin, fresh sand for the training yard, weapons, armor, and a cell to sleep in. None of it is optional. A starving fighter loses. An injured fighter can't be rented out. And a dead fighter before his first match is simply a loss, with no chance of a return. Here's the part that breaks the romantic version of gladiators. The games had rules. You couldn't just send cheap, unskilled men into the arena. Organizers expected a mix of top-ranked fighters and lower-ranked ones. Which meant your most expensive asset, the man who cost 5,000 sesterces, was often the one standing in the sand. When your gladiator finally fights, you don't get paid for the fight itself. You get paid for the rental. A wealthy Roman hosting games might need 20 pairs of gladiators for even a modest event. He rents your fighters by rank. The higher the rank, the higher the rental fee. That's your income. But there's another clause in the contract. If your gladiator dies, the man who rented him must compensate you for the loss. The payment was often several times higher than the rental fee itself. At first, that sounds like protection. Until you realize what it actually means. Your fighter's death isn't always a business failure. Sometimes. It's a payout event. You built a company where the asset dying could become one of the biggest entries on the profit sheet. That's why Emperor Augustus eventually restricted fights to the death. Games without mercy became less common, not because Rome had suddenly grown compassionate, but because dead gladiators were expensive to replace. Every lanista was doing the same calculation. Keep him alive. Rent him again. Keep him alive. Rent him again. So where was the real profit? Not in a single fight. One rental fee still had to cover food, doctors, trainers, equipment, and every expense that kept the school running, whether anyone fought or not. The real money came from volume and reputation. A school with a deep roster of lower-ranked fighters and a handful of proven stars could keep renting men across an entire calendar of festivals and public games. The fighters at the bottom of the roster were your operating margin. They were cheaper to buy, cheaper to maintain, and far more likely to die. The stars at the top were something else entirely. They were capital. Every victory increased their value. Every survival meant another rental, another payday, and an even bigger fee the next time someone wanted them in the arena. A smart lanista wasn't betting everything on one champion. He was managing a portfolio. Some fighters existed to satisfy quotas and would probably never survive long. Others were long-term investments, expected to win, survive, and keep generating income for years. The crowd saw a battle. The lanista saw numbers. Risk, return, and probability. The men who became truly wealthy from gladiators usually weren't the lanisti standing beside the arena. They were the politicians who rented fighters to buy popularity through spectacular games. And the emperors, who owned the largest schools themselves and never had to answer to anyone else's contracts. So, could a lanista become rich? Yes. If he kept his stars alive, kept his calendar full, spread his risk across a large roster, and treated every fighter as an investment instead of a hero. But overpay for one champion. Or lose him too early. And the ledger starts to look like every failed Roman business. A mountain of debt. Outliving the man who signed for it. You thought you were watching a fight. But what you were really watching was a financial contract being settled. In real time. In front of 50,000 people. Who came for the blood. And never once thought about the invoice.